Hey guys, you're listening to episode 125 of the Finish Line podcast, where we discuss the intersection of faith, generosity, and personal finance. My name is Keelan, and I'm here with my co-host and brother Cody. Today we're talking to Alisa Hoober. Alisa has been involved with Hope International since she was in elementary school and spent 10 years on staff before transitioning to be able to spend more time with her young kids. She serves on multiple boards, including Hope International, and is very involved in the generosity community along with her husband. Alisa had lots to share about calling, making priorities, raising kids in a culture of generosity, and setting a financial finish line. Stay tuned to hear all she had to share. You know, this podcast has grown almost exclusively by word of mouth. For those of you who have helped get the message out there by sending a link to a friend or sharing on social media, we just want to say thanks. It really makes an impact. If you think this or any of our other conversations are thought-provoking or inspiring, take a moment to share it with someone. We have been blown away at how God has used some of these stories to make a radical impact in the world of generosity and missions. And you can be a link in that chain. All right, let's get to the interview. All right, we are excited to have Julie Wilson with us again as a guest host with us. And we are very privileged to have Alisa Hoober with us. Alisa, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't you just kick us off telling us a little bit about yourself, maybe some of your background and some of your faith story?
Absolutely. So my husband, Clark, and I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania with our 3 girls. And we both grew up here, but were introduced by a mutual friend who lives in Ukraine. So that's a whole nother story, but really grateful to be here and grateful for my family of origin. I have 2 wonderful parents and brother and sister that we're all really close. And my parents are incredible. They're very prayerful and faith-filled people and live simply and give generously. And that's really shaped their life and their story. And they've lived life just with this outward and upward focus, which has made a big impact on us. And God's used their obedient hearts. I've come to know the Lord at an early age and really grateful to be raised in a Christian family and how that's shaped my life. But when I was really young, my parents started a home building company, Keystone Custom Homes, and then a few years later started a nonprofit, Hope International. And we have been really privileged to be able to grow up and be really involved with both of these organizations. And it really meant that our family trips and family experiences were probably different than my peers because we were really involved in what was happening. But my family lived out this principle, a Wesley principle, to earn all you can, save all you can, and give all you can. Didn't know it as kids, but I've learned that term since, and it really shaped how we grew up. So we didn't have an allowance. They gave us opportunities to earn money and work projects and tried to disguise that as family fun, but something that we all rallied around. They taught us to save, splitting our earnings into tennis ball cans that we had labeled spend, save, and give. And then really they invited us into giving decisions, even from an early age. We would have family meetings and we would talk about the business and how things are going, and then talk about giving and the impact that that's having and have a discussion and have input on that even as kids. Probably as it relates to this conversation, I can remember my dad saying, if we wanted something new as a kid, a toy or something, he would say, do you need that? Do you know how many microfinance loans that could be? And it was something that I've come to appreciate years later, probably not as much at the time. But I think it really shows how they raised us in this culture of generosity, but also contentment, and really had this goal and mindset to use our resources to bless others.
Alisa, so it sounds like you were kind of brought up in a culture where you were taught to pay a lot of attention to how you managed finances and specifically to be generous with your finances. How did that carry through as you grew up and became an adult and started to manage your own finances?
Yeah, I mean, just this mindset had a really huge impact on my life. I think one of the best ways to get bought in was to have exposure to the world. And for me, I had a chance to travel to Ukraine as an 8-year-old. I traveled with my dad, and this was in the 90s when Ukraine was having a really difficult time. And it had a profound impact on my life and shaping my worldview. I formed friendships with my Ukrainian peers and met another 8-year-old named Olia, and we're still friends and stay in touch. And Even at that time, I could realize that we were both kids with big dreams, and we were just happened to be growing up in different parts of the world. And I think these trips and those opportunities to interact with our peers around the world really planted seeds for what contentment looked like and set a foundation for a healthy perspective and even, I think, a healthy comparison point. We've just recently, now that I have kids, we have read the book Raising Grateful Kids in an Entitled World, which is an incredible book. But they have this quote that if we're going to compare ourselves to those who have more, we also need to compare ourselves to those who have less. Materially speaking specifically, but I think it puts things into perspective. When you see material poverty, you can see that it's often a reflection of someone's circumstances. And then the contentment is a reflection of someone's heart. And that goes for no matter where you're born, right? That contentment is really important. So I think those experiences really touched my heart for God's love and care for the most vulnerable, both physically and spiritually. And it really set in motion this question that I keep coming back to is how can I be part of what God's doing around the world?
So I'm curious, I feel like in faith and also in generosity, there's a lot that we take from our family, but then there's kind of a point where the rubber has to kind of meet the road and you have to make decisions on your own, decide, is this how I'm going to run my life, or am I going to do something different? And that's both a challenging period, but also has really significant implications for setting deep roots in what the rest of the trajectory is going to look like. When was that transition in your life, and what did that process look like as you kind of went through it?
I would say it's been a journey for me. I think spiritually speaking, in high school and college, I had some really incredible youth leaders that walked alongside me and really poured into me and encouraged me in my walk with the Lord and helping me make that my own. And I'm incredibly grateful for those people pouring into me alongside my family and so grateful for that impact. I would say the generosity story is one that we've dug into more as a couple in the last handful of years or so. We've had some pivotal giving moments in our family that have encouraged and challenged us as a couple. We attended a few events and peer groups, which really helped to give us language to some of the things that we were living and experiencing and bearing witness to. And one of those peer groups was going through the Women Doing Well Pathway group. Julie and her team have put together an amazing curriculum, getting women talking about generosity and what does that look like and how we can encourage each other and challenge each other and discuss these things in a safe space. We walked through the journey of generosity from generous giving as a couple, which was incredible to do that together. And again, going through scripture, hearing stories, having great conversations, and really thought-provoking questions around what this could look like and setting goals around that. And then we went through a peer group called Forging Your Own Path, which was incredible to think through, okay, what were the things that the prior generation did really well? What can we learn from? What do we want to do for ourselves? And then what do we want that to look like for our kids? So thinking about that in multiple generations has been really helpful. But I think with each of those conversations, I've just walked away really excited about how generosity can transform lives. And that starts with me, and then the ripple effects of that to others.
I'm curious about how your children are pretty young right now, but you've chosen to start young with them. Do you want to share some of the things practically that you do with your kids at this age?
Yeah, my main focus in this season is motherhood. My girls are 6, 4, and 1. So it's a party. It's a fun time. It's really a full and fun season. So I worked on staff with Hope for 10 years and loved that season. I worked in recruiting, and now in this season, my main focus is at home. And I love this too. I think I'm really learning to lean into whatever season I'm in and to really love it. So I get to serve on the board with Hope. I serve on the board with Tomorrow Clubs as well, and which is a children's ministry that we love, and then get to volunteer with some great organizations. And all that to say, I've really enjoyed filling my nap times with really meaningful conversations. So trying to balance this motherhood and staying engaged with other things. But I read this Andy Stanley quote that our greatest contribution to the kingdom may not be something we do, but someone we raise. And as a mother, as a parent, as just someone responsible for raising children, that's really, really a heavy responsibility. And so I want to make sure that as my primary role here, that I'm modeling a biblical worldview, that I'm loving God, loving others, and giving my kids an opportunity to engage with God's work around the world. So I take that really seriously. And we can't guarantee outcomes, but I think we can be intentional with what we're doing. So I think for us, that looks like being really intentional with our prayer time, with what we're reading. Hosting, I think that looks like gathering people around our table, traveling, and then, of course, with our giving financially too. We want to be really intentionally in all of those areas to continue to plant seeds. Paul Tripp has this quote that says, "The passions of the first generation become the preferences of the second generation and become irrelevant to the third generation." And again, that's really gives us a heavy responsibility that I want to be really intentionally focusing on stewarding our generosity story and what God's doing and continuing to plant seeds and draw our kids into what God's doing.
Yeah, Lisa, I remember last time we talked, you shared that some of these things that you get to participate in, you call your nap time hustle, which I know Keelan can definitely relate to with his four little girls. And a lot of our podcast recordings happen to be at nap time. So no coincidence there. But I find that that can sound exhausting. But when you are actually tapped into the passions that God has placed on your heart and the giftings that he has given to you, that it's actually the opposite. It gives you life. It gives you energy. And I'd love if you could share a little bit. I know the Women Doing Well pathway helps you step into that. How have you discovered passion for certain ministry or just callings that God's placed on your life and been able to express that?
Yeah, well, we've really been leaning into focusing how can we be generous with our whole self. So we've been talking about this with our kids, with our time, with our talent, with our treasures. So when I think about my passion areas and being engaged, that can look different in different seasons. So right now, I'm not focused on a career, but I have some time that I can dedicate some of my talents to, even if I'm not doing that for a full-time job. So I've enjoyed using the influence and the people that I've met and connecting different people from different spaces and networks and enjoying connecting them and helping people to go deeper in conversation. And just like we were talking about earlier, just using hospitality as a way to practice generosity and learn what God's doing through different stories. And we found that we learn a lot when we open our home and extend our table. And that can be from someone across the street or a refugee family that just moved here. Sharing a meal can be a great way to be generous and to lean into our passion areas of learning about what God's doing around the world and exposing our kids to that and sharing a meal together.
I'm so curious because this is something my husband and I have been wrestling with. How do you model generosity to your little ones? One privilege I had growing up was my parents, even though we weren't really Jesus followers yet, we were tithers. So that check would go in every week that we were at church, and I'd always get like a little $1 or $5 to throw in. So I was physically doing something. But now what we do at our church is we have digital giving. So we let our daughter like press the button. And there's just something in me like, is this okay? I don't know. I mean, it just doesn't feel the same. And we don't really have cash around anymore. We have a bank account for her. And when she earns money or spends money, we do a little exchange between her account and our, and I'm just curious what you all are doing.
Yeah, I can still relate on the digital giving. It makes it hard. I feel like we're cashing out things for our girls to put into their Give, Save, Spend jars. And it creates some extra time. But it is helpful for them, at least at their really young ages, to be able to see it. And for them, if they're doing a lemonade stand or a job that they earned money for, that they can split it into their jars and then take that into their class at church or send it in the mail. And we'll probably, do it digitally, but they're having the physical act of putting that in an envelope and then inviting them into what we're giving as a family of 5 and what that looks like too. that they have voice in that and can be part of that. I think beyond giving, we're really trying to be intentional with broadening the picture of what generosity can look like. And it's bigger than just the financial gift, that I think it can be more than that. I Like Giving has so many great resources that we've loved, and they have a book series that is really great for young kids. And they talk about generosity being with our thoughts and our words and our time and our money and our attention, our belongings and our influence. And for kids, it makes so much sense. And when we talk through those things, we've used it as a family devotional, and it prompts such great conversation for all of us. And we all walk away learning something new. And it really helps to broaden the conversation about what giving looks like. But we're trying to be intentional with our reading. So we love the I Like Giving books. Also reading missionary biographies. I'm a girl mom, so I'm always pulling off the women missionaries that are making a difference in the world. And also being really thoughtful with our prayer time and not underestimate the power of prayer. So inviting our kids into that. We're often getting out the globe and pointing on the map of where we're praying for, and it makes it active and fun, but also meaningful. And trying to combine those two things is really fun. But I think probably the biggest thing that we've done is travel. And I think that's been something that's been really intentional and really impactful for our kids. So traveling with children is not easy. If you have kids or you know kids, it is an adventure. It's not easy, but we have felt that it's really been worthwhile to give our kids a perspective on how a lot of the world lives and to get outside our bubble. So we went to Zimbabwe and Zambia earlier this year to visit Hope's work, and to see it in action was just absolutely incredible. But just to highlight the impact this had on my kids, during one of our group visits, we were out in a remote village in Zambia, and we were visiting a savings group with Hope. And during our visit, my daughter Caroline was so excited to tell me that she met another 3-year-old. And I love it. They did not speak the same language, but they figured out that they were both 3, and kids find what they have in common. And when you're 3, what else matters? They just, became fast friends, and they walked hand in hand through the village the whole day. We were there, and we were visiting homes and businesses of the savings group members, and the girls walked hand in hand. And I just love that they made a fast friend, but I love the picture of what was happening as they were walking hand in hand, of exactly what we're hoping to do, to walk side by side in partnership with our brothers and sisters around the world. And I think it's the personal connection that made such an impact on my girls, and just to see how God was at work, and he invites us to be part of what he's doing. And there's friends around the world that grew up in a different place, but God's still at work there too. And we can be part of that.
So I love everything about this whole story. I'm a girl dad also, 4 girls.
I love it.
And really similar ages to yours. My youngest is 4. And I gotta ask, can you just walk us through on a practical level how you take really young kids internationally to different environment than they're used to, than we're used to? What kind of practical advice would you give, another parent with, 3-year-old, 6-year-old, etc., for, hey, make sure you think of this before you go to wherever?
Yeah, I would say be ready to be really flexible and just lower your expectations. It is not easy to do. I mean, it's not easy to do anything with kids. Kids just make things adventurous. No matter, that can be here or there. It can be anywhere, but it is an added complexity when you're talking about a flight and a time change and unknown foods and those types of things. There's a lot of reasons not to do it. But I would say the perspective shift is really important. And I think when we can get outside of our bubble and go walk in someone else's shoes, it really helps us to see the world through a different lens. So, my tips are just to be willing to be flexible and see what God has for you. I think we traveled with family, so that was really helpful. If you have another set of hands, is really helpful. And yeah, just be up for an adventure.
I can't say enough that first point to lower your expectations might be a principle for life. But especially when you have little people, because nothing goes as planned. I love that.
Yeah.
That's so helpful.
I mean, I will say there's kids everywhere. So kids find a way of just connecting, even if we're not speaking the same language. They found toys to play with and games to play, like little hand games or soccer or something like that, that just crosses cultures. So the kids really connected. And I think that draws us all closer.
So, Alisa, lately, what has been your focus when it comes to your generosity and your ministry?
Yeah, so my focus areas lately have been really, at home with my kids, pouring into them, but also have loved serving on a few boards. Get to work with Hope International, which we just love their mission and impact they're making. And I also am working with Tomorrow Clubs, which is a children's ministry, sharing the love of Jesus with kids around the world. And then volunteering with great places like Women Doing Well or other organizations that we love. And I've loved using my talents, even though I'm not in a career right now. So being able to stay engaged in volunteering. So that's been one way that I've been able to pour into organizations that I love in the nap hours.
Oh, it's so much more than the nap hours. I'm not letting you off on that one. What I love about how you've chosen to live your life is you're just all in. You're all in. You're not getting a paycheck. That might be the difference, but that's not how we measure eternal impact. We measure eternal impact that God sees our heart and he sees that we are pursuing him and we are relying on him. And I don't care whether you're staying at home, working, or doing some hybrid. That's what God looks for, is a heart that is fully inclined to his voice and doing what he says. And I just admire how you've been able to, navigate that and not put yourself in a box per se, but to really be all in when you're doing that thing, whether it's nap time or after they're in bed at night. It's so dignified. And I think so many women get afraid to give themselves permission. They kind of just think I've got to be either or, but the full on life with Jesus is you do what he tells you to do. And it looks different for all of us. So I just celebrate the way you've chosen to engage, and you are working for the kingdom in so many ways.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I actually think the more you lean into really what Jesus calls you into day after day, as opposed to like big picture, the more kind of blurred everything really becomes. Because my day job, I love my job, but it's like number 5 or 6 on the list of important things to me. And the things that I really care about and I'm energized most about are all things that I don't get paid for. And I think that starts to become a theme more and more as you really lean in. Obviously has been very true in your life, Alisa. I'm curious, with all that you do have going on, how do you effectively say no to other good opportunities? Because there is kind of a maximum amount of you. And at some point, there's going to be good things that you can be a part of, that you can put energy into or finances into or whatever. Mm-hmm. How do you learn to say no and prioritize where God has you?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I completely relate on the personal and professional just merging. And it's so fun when they come together. But I think for me, it's a constant reprioritizing of even day by day, what is important for today. And then also like looking at this season. Okay, I have a couple of kids in school. I have one at home. And so, what does that look like? I think saying yes to volunteering and being really engaged with a few organizations that we love is really important right now. Being really into what my kids are into is really important right now. So that means that I'm saying no to being things like the school class parent or maybe coaching a team of things that I could do, but I'm choosing to say no to that. And I think especially for women, there can be pressure to do it all. And I'm learning to be okay with not doing that right now. And that's something I'm still learning, but I think I'm trying to do fewer things, but do them really well, and then letting the other things go. And I think, and I hope that that makes space for someone else who's really gifted in that space to step in, and it gives them an opportunity to shine in something that they're really gifted at. and allows me to lean into something that I'm really gifted at and passionate about. So I think if, we're trying to do it all, we may unintentionally shut someone else out instead of making space for them to step up. So that's what I'm trying to learn in this season and grow in right now.
And I think also you have a very clear understanding of where God has you right now. Like, even just talking about this, you can say that right off the top of your head. I think, it's easy to take that for granted. A lot of people could not clearly say, where am I supposed to be in this season? What has helped you to really know in this season, my priorities are my kids and the boards that I'm a part of, and these select few volunteering opportunities, and then everything else is just kind of on hold at the moment. And I'm also kind of curious for, obviously that probably has not been the same set of things for your whole life. How do you kind of know when God is putting something new on your plate that is maybe time to say yes to, or time to change the priorities? What does that kind of look like?
Walking through the peer groups with Women Doing Well and then the conversations with Journey of Generosity have been really helpful for us as a couple and as me as an individual to go through those conversations, talking with my Women Doing Well peer group about what our passion areas are. And when you're selecting passion areas, it can't be everything. There have to be things that are not a passion area because that's going to be somebody else's passion area. So when you think of it, it's not that you don't like that thing, it's that someone else is really passionate about that. So it allows us each to have our passion areas. And I think for me, I've had to be really in tune with what's best for my family in this season and recalibrating that every so often with my husband, with my kids, making sure that what we're all doing is working for all of us. Because if it's not working at home, then this really feels like my first calling. And if it's not working, then my other callings, that's just not good. So I would say that I think recalibrating constantly is how I'm determining if it's a yes or no season. And I think if I'm saying yes to something new, then probably something needs to come off that list. And I think God's been really gracious to make that clear in these last few years what that should be. So I've been thankful for that.
Alisa, do you remember your 2-word purpose statement?
Of course I do. It's affirming significance.
How does that interact with your passion areas? Does that help you make some of these hard decisions?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I loved that exercise, walking through that as a group and then even discussing it. But finding that statement as affirming significance really felt true to me as someone who I love walking alongside people and encouraging them in something really meaningful. So whether that's walking with an organization to think through strategic vision, or to spend time visiting a missionary friend who's planning a church in Germany, or writing a note to a birthday card to a next door neighbor, or something like that. It can be a broad spectrum of things, but to walk alongside someone, to affirm and encourage them in something really meaningful and significant, hopefully eternal, that's something that I've really resonated with and has been really grounding for me in something that I can come back to.
Yeah, Lisa, I love how that ties into kind of what you started off this conversation talking about, how there's so many different ways that you can express generosity, and affirming significance is certainly one of those ways where you can just let someone know that who they are, what they're doing, what God has them working on throughout different seasons of life has significance. And I think people do really need those reminders from time to time. And you've mentioned a couple different communities that you're part of where you get to share some of the things that you've learned just in the family you grew up in and throughout life and with your family today. Why do you think that it is important to share the message of generosity, and what has been challenging about that?
Yeah, I think that we're better together. So I think that when we can learn from each other and spur each other on and living generously and giving cheerfully and living out this calling, we all are better for that and we all grow from that. Well, I'll start with myself as an individual. I'm not perfect. I'm still learning. As a family, we're still learning and growing, and there's a lot that we can work on. But I think we have learned so much from this space, and to be able to contribute to it as well has been something that's really meaningful. Again, it's just something that we can spur each other on. I think we are really called to be stewards, and we want to be good stewards of all that God's entrusted to us. And that includes our resources, but our time, our talents, our treasure. And I think the best way to figure out how to be a good steward is to ask the owner, right? God has been so generous with us. And so we've been really challenged to ask him, how can we be good stewards of his resources, and to bring people alongside us to encourage us in that, and to walk alongside other people and encourage them in living out that calling, to love God, to love others, and to live generously has been something that's been really important to us.
Okay, I'm curious, how are you generous to yourself? What does that look like? Because I think that's something, I think everybody struggles with that, honestly. I look at my husband and I sometimes just go, would you just go do something fun for yourself? His 2 words are assuring significance.
Oh,
and it's wonderful to be married to him, but I think sometimes he has trouble turning it off. But, especially as you juggle different aspects and roles as a woman, how does God show generosity to you in your self-care?
Julie, that's a tough question.
I know, that's why I asked it.
Yeah, God's been so generous with me, but myself showing generosity to myself, that's tough. I am a helper by nature and a doer by nature. And so I have to hold myself back sometimes, to be honest, from signing up for all the things to help with all the things. So I've really leaned into what we were talking about before of like when to say yes and when to say no. I've really tried to challenge myself on that, to intentionally say no. But I think God's been so gracious to give me an incredible community that I've met through a lot of these spaces, to have women that I can text and have play dates with, and we can have a really meaningful conversation while our kids are at the playground. And there's a million interruptions, but we're having really meaningful conversations about what God's doing and how we're learning and growing. So I would say my community and my family are ways that God's been so kind to me. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, I relate a lot to what you were saying in the beginning there about just being able to say no and know what you're really called to at any given point. Really is a lot of self-care in itself, and it prevents burnout, keeps you going for the long haul. And I've definitely found that true in my own life. And which, I think that what you have done well is when you're not doing the stuff that is just filling space, and all that you're doing is what you really feel like is your top priorities, there's like an energizing effect to that, where even in, what some people would call work, you get filled up by part of that. And I've found that in my life when I'm in a season where I'm kind of well aligned in time and direction, energy, whatever, that I just don't feel as drained at the end of the day. But the world is broken and it falls apart so quick. So, I just try to keep that window as long as I can. But then, it's just a constant matter of recalibrating and being like, okay, there's too much now. We got to really hone in. Mm-hmm. But I think that you have obviously a very intentional focus on that practice in your life, which has obviously borne a lot of fruit.
I'm still learning. That's all.
So I know you and your whole family very involved in the generosity space. I'd love to just hear, for somebody who this is the first conversation they're hearing about generosity, really all they've ever heard of is just tithing on Sunday morning. What would you want that person to know? What kind of concepts, things that maybe even seem natural to you from childhood, would you want people to know about the generous life?
Wow, the generous life is such a good life. I would say I have learned so much from the stories of radical generosity. Many of them that you've shared here, people that are living really radically. And I've been challenged by those to live within a lifestyle finish line, to live below our means, to give beyond our means, and what that can look like. And I would say that generosity can be really radical and really huge. And generosity can be really simple. It does not take a lot, and it doesn't have to be just financial. It can be a kind word. It can be an encouraging note. It can be giving someone your full attention. That's really generous. And I think it can be sharing your influencer platform. And I love that when we practice generosity, we see growth. When we practice gratitude, I think we become more generous. And I think the joy of giving really becomes contagious. And just the ripple effects of that are really, really beautiful.
Well, you mentioned a finish line in there, and I would love to just hear a little bit more about what that's looked like for you. I know there's a couple different finish lines. You're talking about a lifestyle finish line or like a spending finish line. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about kind of how you came to that decision and maybe what the process of figuring that out as a couple looked like.
Yeah, I think it's been a really fun conversation as a couple to challenge ourselves on how can we set limits on what our lifestyle should look like. It could look different than it does look. So how are we thinking about that? Really intentionally thinking about limiting what our spending is, and then thinking about how can we also continue to earn and push ourselves in our earning potential. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I think for a while I was thinking, well, if you set a finish line, then you can just kind of coast. And that's not true. You can continue to earn all you can and give all you can and save all you can, live frugally and limit your spending and maximize your giving. So that combination has really been fun. And Clark is incredible. He manages our finances and really has led that conversation for us. But it's been really fun to push on both sides of that and been, just challenging ourselves to be radical in what this looks like for us in this season.
I was just reminded of the story that you shared from when you were a child and you were told, like, hey, do you really need that? Do you know what that money could fund instead? And I think some people are bothered by that kind of thinking, but that's really the way that I am evaluating things that I might purchase for myself today with a finish line is like, you're kind of making a decision in a broader sense of I can quantify what I need. And I understand that when I read Matthew 6 and it talks about do not store up for yourself treasure on earth, but instead store up treasure in heaven, like you can do that through generosity. You can do that, like you were saying, by observing where God is working around you and going there and trying to participate in it. There's an exchange that's happening. And I think initially it can feel like sacrifice of I have to give something up and that's too bad for me. But it's really like I'm exchanging growing my lifestyle, growing my possessions for something that is so much better. It's a gift from my Father that he's allowing me to do that. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that's something that you've been able to practice throughout time. Have you found that there's, in the way that you talk with your kids about the decisions that you're making, are you finding that it's challenging to walk through that? Are they kind of picking up on this exchange?
Oh, it's easy. No, it's so challenging. Yeah. And I should just qualify that to say I had everything I needed. And these were wants. Like, you want this. Is it something that we should be purchasing? So I was not lacking. And this was above and beyond purchases. And I think, wow, it is something that I'm continually learning. And I'm trying to teach my kids too. I mean, kids, I don't know, maybe it's just my kids are collectors and love, things, and trying to engage them in their childhood joy and thinking eternally. And even thinking about, like I was talking about earlier, what's our comparison point of, everybody has this new toy. Is that true? So I think maybe a few friends have that. And so let's think about this in the bigger picture. So trying to gauge that, it is a very difficult, very ongoing conversation, one that I'm still learning. And I think at the root of it is a heart of contentment. And when we can actively practice gratitude, I think that really, really helps to build our contentment. So we're trying to work on that and grow in our contentment and grow in our gratitude and maybe grow in our discussions of what's important.
It's so good. The world, I can't remember how many messages we get daily that we're not enough. We don't have all the things that we need, and our kids are getting that. And it's an all-out assault. So if you don't have a plan to combat that with your own journey and then help your kids combat it, it just will automatically start to take you in the wrong direction. And it's constant. And I find social media, the influencers, and then whatever influencer is hot for that week is talking about this particular, in our world, it's these water cup things. They change every week. Which one is the cool one? Like, no, we've got 40 water bottles. We're not buying another one. I was like, you're going to have to throw these away. I mean, I joke, but then I think, oh my gosh, like, I don't understand the water bottle world. We didn't even have water bottles.
Exactly.
We just had glasses of water, So it really is something that if you're not intentional, it will take over.
Right. And that's the enemy. I think he can really get in, and comparison can be the thief of joy and contentment. And that's at the root of it.
And it starts with us, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I was talking with David Eaton from Axis, and he said, we always think, the school or the Sunday school are the biggest influencers, but we as the parents are the number one influencers of our children and what they think, feel, and do. And I just think it's so important that we remember that, because we can get caught up in all the things. And yeah, it's just beautiful to have conversations like this where we're reminded of what is most important.
One of the things you mentioned earlier, I just wanted to come back to when you were talking about finish lines. And you mentioned something that doesn't always get brought up, but has been brought up from time to time. And I have found very true, I think, for both Cody and me, which was that aspect of earning. Because, when you kind of set a line and you say, like, this is really all we need. We don't need to keep, having higher and higher income for ourselves. Then it's easy as you just kind of think theoretically about that. And you're like, well, why would I really work anymore? Like, what's the point? And I think that there is actually, in kind of the first stage after setting a finish line, there's kind of a peace and contentment that comes from that, because we naturally, just as a culture, as people or whatever, we naturally kind of overcommit ourselves, push harder than God really meant us to in earning, especially career or whatever. It's like all around us. And setting a finish line helps you to back off from that a little bit and say, like, what am I really doing here? Like, do I need to work that extra 10 hours a week? What is this accomplishing? But then there is a phase that comes after that, I think, pretty reliably, once people have set a finish line. And we've heard story after story like this, where after you've experienced some of the contentment, it actually creates room where then you can actually get involved in what God is doing. You can actually kind of hear a little bit better, especially in regards to your finances. And then, especially as you begin to give more and more, and you see, you're like stepping into the story more and more, you're a greater part of things around you. Then it's like, all right, how can I actually ramp this up? How can I be even more a part of what's going on? Like, I know if I do this, this side hustle or whatever, then it means this for hope or for whatever, that is. And it's actually like a really freeing kind of work. Like, it doesn't feel like the same kind of pressure, comparison kind of career, whatever, that most of the world experiences. It's like a reoriented, redefined kind of work. So, but I'm just glad that you brought that up, because I think God designed it that way. I think that is a much closer approximation to how we were designed to work, to be a part of things. So there was work before the fall. Adam was naming animals, and Adam and Eve were tending the garden and whatever. So that's not new, but certainly work is broken in many ways today. So Alisa, we have covered so many things. You have a bunch of cool things going on right now. As you think about the next 5 to 10 years, what are you most excited about?
Oh my goodness. Oh, so much to be excited about. Man, in 10 years, I have a 16-year-old, so that's a little frightening, but really exciting too. But I'm really excited, and I pray that my kids can catch a vision for what God's doing around the world. We have such a global focus. So just for them to get a taste of that and to grow in that would be really an answer to prayer. And it was meaningful for me as a child. And I hope that as a young girl, I caught a vision, and I hope that they do too. And just to see that God invites us into what he's doing. But I think too, I'm excited for my kids to challenge me and to challenge Clark and I to be more generous too. And that we could spur each other on, and just to see their passion areas grow and their influence and how God is developing them as individuals is going to be really exciting to see.
Well, as we get to the end of our time together, I wanted to leave space for our manager's minute. And this is how we end every episode, with a practical action that our listeners can take to step into their role as stewards and to manage God's wealth wisely. So, Alisa, do you have a suggestion to share with our listeners today?
Yeah, so I think this fits with the season that I'm in, but I think my challenge is to ask us, how can we involve our kids in what we're doing day to day, into the prayers, into the dreams, into the work, the trips, the conversations, anything that we're doing. I know this is something that really shaped my life as my parents invited me into their journey. And I hope that it's shaping the lives of my own children as we invite the next generation to journey with us. So inviting our kids into it, that's something that I'm really thankful for, and would invite others to do that too.
Yeah, I second that. And I'm so glad that there is a growing community of people who are really trying to do that well. Because even in just this conversation, I've already learned so much about how I can be thinking. I'm already trying to figure out how I'm going to get my girls on a trip, or probably before that, how I'm going to convince my wife to let us take 4 kids on a plane somewhere. But, I'm just glad that there is a whole generation trying to plant seeds of generosity in young kids, and that we might get to see the fruit of that in 15 years, whatever that looks like.
I want to just a shout out to those that, for whatever reason, you're not married, or you're not, you don't have children of your own, aunts and uncles. Every adult can help a child be generous. And I just, having been single for a lot of my life, I always just feel like I'm such a family girl, but I also know that family in God's kingdom includes the whole body of Christ. So I know you would have said that, but I thought I would just throw that in there just in case someone's listening thinking, I wish I had kids. You do. You do. Parents, every parent needs 10 or 12 other adults that will invest with them and their children.
Absolutely. It takes all of us to invite the next generation to journey alongside us, and we cannot do it alone. So it's really important to have other really engaged adults walking alongside us.
Often they come with a lot more credibility than the parents do too.
It's amazing.
Yeah. True.
Alisa, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all the ways that God is using you right now, and just grateful for your story, for your wisdom, and for being with us.
Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the show, guys. If you want to find any references or links from today's show, you can always find them in our show notes at finishlinepledge.com/episode 125. Before we finish up, I have a quick question for you. Have you ever stopped to answer the question, how much is enough? A financial finish line is designed to help you do just that. Our 90-day Finish Line Pledge breaks down the process into 3 easy steps. Step 1, define how much is enough for you and your family to spend in a single month, and use that as your monthly spending budget for 90 days. Step 2, as God provides money to manage, set aside any margin outside of your finish line into a separate bank account. Step 3, after 90 days, explore the many ways you can use the margin you've set aside to create joy, purpose, and impact in God's kingdom. Want to learn more? Check out our website at finishlinepledge.com. That's all we have for today. We'll see you next time.